Our next session that we're ready to hit straight away, session 4. We're getting through these at a terrific rate, and I think you'll agree the panellists are really doing a fantastic job. We're looking now at new woody crop industries, staying in the paddock, but these are the larger perennials, in particular mallee trees, and how they can be integrated into agriculture with a range of benefits, as well as having the potential to provide farm income in the future. So let's watch the video of the new woody crop industries program. Thank you.
The CRC had two broad objectives. One was to improve the profitability and productivity of existing farming systems by inserting perennials into those systems, and the second was to develop new regional industries, and the mechanism that the CRC focused on to do that was the new Woody Crops program.
The mallee option was taken on by Future Farm Industry CRC because it was so innovative in the case for mallee because of the multiple benefits that mallees can deliver on a farm. It's a remarkable tree. It uses an amazing amount of water in the landscape, and by doing that there's a number of environmental benefits that can be delivered because of greater water control in the landscape, but also provides shelter, it provides habitat for wildlife, and this has been demonstrated by CRC research, and it can be a potential new industry.
For a new industry to develop, you need three major components. The first is to have the feedstocks available for the industry. The second is to have the technologies that can convert the material into a useful end product, and obviously we need a market at the end of it. So you need those three components to make the system work.
Mallees are a large group of eucalypts. There's a couple of different species, but we've zeroed in on several of them that are mainly native West Australian ones that are well adapted to what we think will be high productivity and robustness, toughness enough to live in a difficult landscape because they're perennial plants. They're selected, at least theoretically, for high biomass production so that we have a good harvest, a good yield of materials that can then go into commercial products. The mallees are tough, can be harvested on a regular short cycle. And that minimises their impact, while at the same time they can be extensively planted.
There are lots of benefits in having mallees growing on the farm. I think one of the main ones is just having the shoulder belts for lambing ewes and protection from the wind and cold in the wintertime. There's obviously the salinity benefits that come along as the trees get bigger and using up water.
What you see here is a pretty typical layout. Long, narrow belts of trees, spaced about 100 metres or so apart, usually some multiple of cultivation rows or cultivation widths for the conventional equipment that farmers use. The trees are more or less on the contour because it's very desirable to intercept as much water as possible, both to get better yield, but also to use more water, because that is ultimately the cause of the groundwater accumulation in the valleys just downslope from here. And so we can kill two birds with one stone. The layout is also well designed. We can build into the design convenience for a harvesting operation. So the harvester will be a one-row harvester, and there will be multiples of rows and a continuity of these belts, as you see here, across the paddock, so that the machine can operate efficiently with little downtime between areas of belt.
The development of a harvesting system is critical to the efficient delivery of woody crop materials into a processing stream. To do this, we developed, in conjunction with Biosystems Engineering, essentially a combine harvester for woody crops, which cuts the trees off and chips them in one go and then delivers them as chipped material. One of the really important things about this system is that the crops regrow after the harvest, and so you can harvest them time after time. The harvester was a success for the CRC. It effectively harvested mallees and other eucalypts that we trialled it on, and the intellectual property for the harvester has actually been sold to Biosystems Engineering, who we developed the machine with, and they're looking to develop the next commercial phase of the machine. One of the key things in developing a new industry is that you need an end use, and for the mallee industry, there is the potential of providing material to produce sustainable jet fuel for the aviation industry.
Virgin Australia and the whole industry are committed to addressing their greenhouse gas emissions and their sustainability. We have an aspirational target of carbon neutral growth from 2020. To do that, we have a number of strategies. Where we can get the large reduction is through renewable jet fuel. So studies that we've undertaken have shown that it is possible to produce renewable jet fuel to the right quality, sustainably, and at the right cost, utilising local feedstocks from right around Australia. We were aware of the work being undertaken by the Future Farm Industry CRC on the Woody Crop Program, and we partnered with them to look at building the supply chain to provide the fuel we required for our aircraft. It's important that the fuel that we utilise not only fulfills the cost criteria as well as the quality and volume, but is also sustainable. The work that the Future Farm Industry CRC are doing with the mallee program demonstrates that sustainability angle as well as the quality and quantity aspect.
The intent was that we would be probably harvesting by now and we'd be getting a commercial benefit from that harvest process, which still seems to be a long way off.
Despite farmers having planted significant areas of mallees in southwest WA, the supply chain is currently incomplete. The lack of a regionally based production capacity is a limitation to the development of the mallee industry. We look forward to the day when these regional industries are fully developed.
I think mallees will eventually hold a huge benefit for agriculture, because it's an alternative crop. It's got multiple benefits and it's got the potential to be a large industry on its own. I guess I'm a true believer in the mallee system, so anyone that's considering what to do with their mallees if they already have them on the farm, then it's a real problem at the moment, but I believe in hanging in for the future, and I guess you've already done the work, so why knock them out? And when there's possibly something going to happen in the relatively near future.
It's an impressive little portfolio of benefits that mallees can do, but it is awaiting a new industry to take it on, and that's really where the anticipation is now. Will there be a new industry? And the CRC and its partners are working on some short-term opportunities to build that industry.
And joining me on the stage now to speak to the new Woody Crop Industries, we have CRC Research Director John McGrath back up on stage here. We have, coming along next, we have David or Keith. We have Keith without a hat, which is why I didn't recognise him. Keith Parnell, who you would have seen in the video, the farmer from Tincurrin. We've got... now we've got David next to John. Richard. Yep, that's right, that's Richard. Richard Sulmer, Managing Director of Biosystems Engineering. David, I'm guessing and seeing now with the video, and because your name tag is facing me, Manager of Sustainability and Climate Change with Virgin Australia. And on the end here, everybody's favourite mallee man, John Bartle from the WA Department of Parks and Wildlife. Now, it's a very ambitious program, and it always has been very aspirational, and there's a lot achieved, but as you've said throughout the video, there's what's missing is a regional industry, so that's the exciting bit that's still ahead of us. The supply chain's critical to developing new industries, and there's been some progress in that, but John, what was in it for the CRC? Why did the CRC choose to back this project, to run with this project?
Yeah, thanks, Bernie. That's a really good question. I guess it underpins why the CRC was involved in this area at all. It goes back to one of the mechanisms that we had to develop perennial systems, and that was to develop the new perennial systems. And the woody crops was probably the primary mechanism that the CRC had to do that. So the purpose was not only just to develop a crop that would provide income for farmers, but to try and develop, as you said, the whole supply chain without that whole integrated system. And I guess that's one of the messages that comes across, right the way through the morning, is that the reliance of value through these systems comes from the development of those integrated systems. So that was the purpose of it, to try and develop the integrated systems. Obviously, the second part of that is something that's been mentioned all the way through the morning and is a constant theme for the CRC, which is the delivery of the environmental benefits. And obviously the high water use systems that the mallees provide are very central to that. I guess the way that we've gone about doing those things are summarised in those 3 points there at the bottom of the screen. So there's the development of the feedstock, which is all about the identification of the trees that can be productive and the systems that we can develop to grow them effectively with. Developing the supply chain, and one really important component of that is the mallee harvester that you saw, but there's a whole logistic systems that go along with managing large scale commodities in a regional context, and so that's been a very strong focus of the program. And then very, very importantly is the development of the industries that provide the if you like, the demand pull so that those things can actually be achieved. And there's two broad areas that covers. The first is small scale local industries, and then the larger regional, national and international industries and markets that highlighted by the aviation area. So I guess there's the reasons and then the manner in which the CRC went about it in a very, very strongly integrated way.
Mm. And John Bartle, mallees aren't a product that you associate with really highly productive farming ventures, but you've been a champion of them for a long time. Sell us on mallees. What is it that makes them such a good option?
Well, the wheat belt's a pretty tough environment for perennial plants, especially from the point of view of the availability of water. Most of the wheat belt regions of Australia have an evaporation rate that exceeds rainfall by 3 to 7-fold. And then there's periodic seasonal drought and periodic drought later as part of that high evaporation environment. And perennial plants as a group, including the herbaceous perennials, have been talked about a bit already, but especially the woody ones, they have to have a range of adaptations to fit into these environments. In fact, there's a wide range, all the way from those that just accept total desiccation and the consequences of that for them over the droughty and hot periods, and the others that scrounge and tough it out and do a fair bit better. And mallee's got that latter strategy, and part of doing it better is very deep root systems, the ability when times are tough to measure out water use, and then when times get better, they're sprinters, just like our farmers. Mm. So that's the sort of conceptual reason why we've gone into these things as the select sort of prospect for being well adapted to the system. I think when you put a system like that, or a species like that, that's got this latent capacity for real performance into our present agriculture, which really leaves a bit of a surplus for water, it's milk and honey for mallee. They are in the right place to complement that system. They'll skim out any surplus water and turn it into a profitable return. But of course it's a biomass return, and industries are yet to come, but conceptually it's very sound. I think the other couple of related things to do with climate that are important is that the tree is well adapted to tolerating the extremes of drought and fire that come with in arid environments. They can simply get rid of their top parts, and they have a root system which will survive anything, and that capacity is well adapted also to regular harvest. So instead of letting fire or drought take the tops off, we'll take the tops off regularly and keep them in trim. So it's a permanent long-term investment with a big solid root system underneath.
Well, it is a permanent long-term investment. It hasn't been paying off for the people who've planted it so far in terms of an industry, and supply chain is critical to getting an industry going. How did the CRC go about setting up a supply chain?
Well, I guess you could take the point of view of supply chain as the portion where we harvest and contribute it to deliver it to a processor. And Richard Sulman will talk about that, I guess. So But just thinking in the whole concept of how do you get a big volume of biomass supply ready for industries to process, that's where we started at 20 years ago. We've probably spent $1 million a year for the last 20 years trying to do this as well as possible. And of course, you need to develop, we started from scratch, you need to develop everything from scratch. And so we look carefully at each of the steps in a processing, in a biomass production and processing chain. So we looked firstly at species and their potential, which species might suit best from amongst the mallees, because we knew that mallees generically were the right pick. We got breeding programs going, and today we're in a position where we can deliver improved seed for any commercial use that might emerge. The whole agronomy of mallee, we talk about agronomy because this is an agricultural crop, not a woody crop. Tell me if I'm going too fast or too long.
No, not yet. You've got about 30 seconds.
And so we got the agronomy right. A huge contribution was made by nurserymen and farmers in understanding how to practically deploy mallees to the field. And we backed that up with a lot, especially during the recent CRC period, a lot of really hard-nosed research about water use, nutrition, and how to do that better. We had a little bit of an interesting breakthrough recently with the work that Rick Bennett's done and looking at better capture of water, and so that becomes a fundamental part of design. Richard will talk about delivery. I guess our weak spot has been, in spite of all our efforts and all of our so far our efforts to get processing going, there's enormous promise there. There's a real interest in biomass, and there's a big process going underway at the moment where existing biomass resources are being taken up simply because electricity is getting more expensive. There's all this momentum behind more efficient energy and climate change issues. And so we believe mallee will be the next big virgin resource of biomass, and that and we see real interest from prospective, very big developers, particularly in biofuels. We had a go at electricity. It looked a bit hard initially. We're certainly backing that up now with much more closely looking at small combined heat and power systems for existing regional industries, because the big bit's being a bit slow, but the big bit is still there. And we expect within the decade, or within 5 years for startups, and within the decade, good operating industries.
I like the way that you worked virgin in there too, with David sitting right beside you. Smooth as silk, John. Now let's get to the bit that I'm really excited about, which is that harvester, because in a previous life I was a judge on the New Inventors, and we would have loved to have you on the show, I tell you, Richard. So you're the Managing Director of Biosystems Engineering, and this is obviously a project very close to your heart. Why was the harvester needed from your perspective?
Oh, well, I mean, there it is. The sales pitch got me in. And,
okay, good. Next question. What innovative features of the harvester really make it work?
Okay, well, I mean, what people need to understand with the harvester project is that what the CRC initiated was something pretty special in terms of engineering, because it's not often you get to design a harvester, or any machine for that matter, that actually will in itself leave a legacy not just to the woody crops but also to the forestry industry. So essentially what we've developed is a machine that is the first wood chipping device in the world that is an axial flow feed mechanism. And simply by doing that, by bringing the trees in vertically, continuously, and in single file, we have smashed records already with the P1. We didn't really talk about this at the end of our trial. We've exceeded the 20 tonnes and we've left it at that, but the metrics in terms of how many trees we can harvest per hour, in terms of what forestry technology can do, to give you a sense, forestry does about 400 trees per hour. With that prototype, which is an underpowered, very light construction device, averaged in its trial in the last instance 780 stems per hour. So we, obviously, because of the challenges in Australia, mainly because of the cultural and political position at the moment in using wood for energy and other purposes, I kept one eye on other parts of the world and Brazil in particular. We went to Brazil. Caterpillar Brazil has signed an NDA with us. They straight away spotted something special in this concept, and we are now on the verge of rolling this technology out internationally. However, we have received $1.5 million from WA, and we as a company recognise and understand that that's given us the leg up as a company and our shareholders. And so at the moment we've applied through ARENA to now build the next commercial scale machine and demonstrate it in Australia for the information to be available for Australia. And then, so that's essentially where we're at. I mean, it's this is a very difficult project because you're developing a machine that is a machine that will actually create the business model. Okay, so without the harvester, you can't enable the business model to happen. So it's a pretty, either you've got to be mad. I do have probably a genetic disposition to taking on really impossible projects. But this project, from the world, like the international standpoint, and the drivers there that will implement this machine internationally, you can be happy to know that the CRC has actually kick-started something that will not just leave a legacy for bioenergy in Australia, but it's actually going to leave a legacy of a new technology worldwide. And just to give you a sense of inventiveness for Australia, we've now invented the trifectas of harvesting machines. We've done the grain harvester, the sugar harvester, and now we've developed the world's first dedicated biomass harvester. So it's something we should be all proud of, and I thank the CRC for the efforts to work with LEAD, get those fundings. Really the difficult part for me, obviously, I step overseas and I see eucalyptus used in absolutely every aspect of life in Brazil. Their heat energy generally all comes from eucalyptus. It's unusual to go down the fossil path when you've got eucalyptus available. So to come back to Australia, it is a position that we've got here that if we don't shake it, then unfortunately the work of John and the CRC is really put at risk. And I think as a group we all need to take note of that, because this is not going to happen in Australia unless we want it to happen. Okay, so and thanks. I applaud Virgin for being part of this and stepping up, because we need to show the validity of this project, and so this harvester certainly has done that.
Thanks, Richard. That's great. And no doubt you'll be giving mate rates to whoever needs the harvester once the industry is established in Australia. Correct. You'll never forget your roots. That's right. Now, Keith, you have done, like everyone else has done the research and development. You've planted these trees with this hope that the industry will come, and so far it hasn't. I mean, that must be very challenging and disappointing. You're a farmer, so you're used to challenge and disappointment. But why? Well, my dad was a dairy farmer. Don't worry. Why do you think viable markets haven't appeared, and what's that meant for you?
It's certainly been an interesting ride, Bernie. We started planting these goddamn things nearly 20 years ago with following the enthusiasm of people like John Bartle and Sid Shea and the forerunners in the industry, and it's always looked like it's had promise. And as I said in the video, I'm a true believer. I still think that it will come along, but market conditions just haven't been right. We've had we've had the carbon mitigation program developing and looking like that it was going to be a breaker, if you like, a position that would allow the resource to develop to a point where biomass and energy markets could follow along from the back of. We had the global financial crisis crashed world markets generally all over, and that had a major impact on what would happen with carbon mitigation. And certainly in Australia, the political climate wasn't right to maintain the $23, $25 a tonne carbon tax price, and the linkage was made to the EU price at a very low level, and that's basically collapsed the planting and the development of the resource on farm. It's just as an example, we've gone from our own nursery situation on farm. We were producing about 4 million stems a year. That's collapsed to producing probably 100,000 oil mallee stems and 300,000 total seedlings in the nursery. So that, together with the changing in focus with NHT programs and all the rest of it, has meant a total change in focus of tree planting across all of Australia. So I think it's quite unfortunate the way it's gone, but I still hold that it is enormous potential, and we've sort of been planting for a long period of time on our own property, and we're certainly not going to pull our trees out because I think in the relatively near future we will crack that biomass market, and hopefully we can get some of the heat and power systems up, and there's one operating nearby, only 100 kilometres from where we are, that are producing steam and electricity for their own pellet making process, and I think there's huge potential for a number of these smaller processes that will help us along the way and sort of help to regain some of the confidence that's been lost across the industry over the last sort of 3 or 4 years.
Richard, I think Keith needs to get the harvester gratis, okay? Not just, there's a lot of investment and heartache has gone on.
It's all part of
there.
our philanthropy work. Yeah.
David, it looks like there is potential, as is so often the case there's potential with the aviation sector for a biofuel for jets, but you need all kinds of signals and regulations to make it a really viable proposal. Why are companies like Virgin and Airbus interested in woody biomass as a fuel source?
Well, we're interested in these fuels at a higher level for a number of reasons, and that drills down to this particular feedstock. There's only a certain number of feedstocks that we can use. Well, I suppose any carbonaceous type material you can use, but that can be quite limited. We did a series of studies a few years ago, and it was demonstrated that woody type wastes, regrowth, etc., crop stubble, mallees, has the best potential to give us the volumes. I've done a few. I've been writing furiously away here.
Wow, that is literally back of the envelope.
and we use about 800 million litres in Australia a year, which is a fair bit. And so say WA, for an example, divided that's about 100 megalitres, and keep in mind we just purchased SkyWest, so that's even more. There's some lovely old aircraft we're operating over there, uses a fair bit of fuel as well. So we need a bit, we'll make it more efficient. So we need about 100,000 tonnes of fuel just in WA alone a year, and I think that would translate to about 300,000 to 400,000 tonnes of biomass. Now we could use something like vegetable oils, and a study was recently completed by Qantas and Shell, and they did look at utilising and as we know, that's been used since day one for things like diesel, biodiesel, etc. The truth is you can get more for raw vegetable oil than you can for a finished product that you make out of that oil. We need to get the volumes, we need to get it at the right price, and we need to get it sustainably. And I should have mentioned this first, the quality. And I sort of, it's easy to sit here as an airline and say that to a farmer or a producer and say, just bring it on. We'll only pay $1 a litre. We have to change our mindset as an industry to try to help to enable the supply chain. So I'm sort of going outside the bounds of your question.
No, that's
there.
good.
But I see that if we're going to go outside that boundary, this is the sort of feedstock we need to look at. And as an airline, we have to get a bit more creative about, okay, well, how do we make this cheaper? How do we get this to the quality and the sustainability? And we're going down that path a bit more. And I suppose I hang in there. We can produce this stuff to the quality.
Yeah.
There's no doubt there. How do we get the cost down? We've got some new ideas here. So thanks for not cutting them down.
I look forward to flying Virgin with the scent of eucalypt wafting out of the out of the engines. That'll be a great day indeed. And hopefully there's enough land in WA to plant the trees that are needed for it. So
there definitely is.
Yeah, terrific. It was a pretty big place, so I would hope so. Time for your questions, and we've gone a little bit over on the questions. Do we have any ready to go? If you can just get, yep, there's one right there. If we can get straight to that gentleman.
My name's Dick Davis. Question for Richard. I used to work for ICI in the UK about 30 years ago or more. They invested in a big biomass plant which was never economic. It was one of those situations where everybody knew somebody who may have worked on it, but nobody had responsibility for it. Now, the great thing about a large chemical company is the ability to cobble together new equipment with pots and pans and put them on existing equipment and so on. It's clear that you're going to need a huge processing capability in order to realise the potential of this. Is there any opportunity, if not in Australia, of accessing plant and equipment in Southeast Asia or anywhere else where this could be done?
You're talking about conversion technology? So the technology to convert the wood into... I mean, well, to give you a sense of scale, how much did you say, David?
We use 800 megalitres approximately in Australia.
How many tonnes?
500,000 green tonnes.
Say 100,000 tonnes just in WA alone.
Okay,
so.
500,000 green tonnes.
Green
In Brazil,
tonnes,
2 power plants just got approved. They won the bid for electricity at $75 a megawatt hour. They're building 2 150 megawatt systems. That's 2 150 megawatts. That's 3 million tonnes of eucalyptus that'll run those 2 systems. There is the Dow Chemical project in northern Brazil in Bahia. It takes 200,000 tonnes and runs a combined heat and power. The technology's off the shelf already, especially for combined heat and power. My partner and I did a trip around Brazil, 3,000 kilometres, going past industrial processes. And what's sitting outside? Eucalyptus. You go in, you talk to the CEO, they say they have a plantation. They're bringing in 30, 40, 50,000 tonnes. The volumes is not hard to get, okay? The conversion's not hard to do. What we have in Australia is a situation where if you don't have a harvester, you don't have experience harvesting. And if you don't have experience harvesting, you don't have the ability to set the cost structure. And if you don't have the cost structure, then we don't have an investment, okay? It's very simple steps. There's no chicken and egg. You have to start with technologies. You have to then get experience with those technologies. Then you can set the business model with those technologies. Where we sit at the moment is we've got all this great research sitting up here. We just now got to put it together into a working supply chain. And that's what we need to put to the Australian government, because we're not going to see the investors come out of the woodwork to invest in a supply chain to see that happen.
What's missing?
What's missing? Dollars. Give us 50 million and we will have a supply chain, trees, harvesting system and a conversion unit plonked in one of the towns in WA. It may not be economic to start with in the first 5 years, but we learn. Okay? We're not going to learn by not doing. Brazil learns because they just take risk. They just get in there and do it. And now they've developed massive systems.
How does 50 million compare with the amount of money, say, that was pulled out of car investment in? It's
minor. I mean, for example...
So there's money floating around, is what I'm getting at.
There's plenty of money.
Shifted to WA.
Yeah, Australia has a focus on electricity. I understand why, because there's a carbon intensity with electricity. Brazil, for example, runs 80% of its electricity grid is renewable. Okay, 80%. 70% of it is hydro, biomass, and the rest wind. So, you know, it's a will. If you want, you know, I go and have pizza in Brazil, it's fired on eucalyptus. The grain dryers in Brazil, eucalyptus. Food processing, eucalyptus heat. What we've got to get to is, you know, to the stage of making biofuel. But you can't make biofuel if you don't have a supply chain, because you've got to have the cost for the supply chain. And until we actually step up and have a coordinated plan for developing a supply chain and then running it for at least 5 years, then we're going to see a decade pass. Keith here, we'll see no activity. And that's the parting words I leave with you guys, is that, you know, we're on the brink of something special here. It's just we've got to get out there, roll our sleeves up and do it.
And we need a little bit of leadership in that as well. So
exactly
thanks
right.
for pointing that out again. Ladies and gentlemen, join me in thanking our panellists for a very aspirational and inspirational program, the new Woody Biocrops.